Hi, my name is Dr. Gary Thompson. I'm a Director of Clinical Training and Community Advocacy Services at Early Life Child Psychology and Education Center in South Jordan, Utah. And I want to thank the senators and representatives for this opportunity to speak to you about a subject that is near and dear to my heart. I hope you don't mind that on occasion that I glance at notes. I'm a 50-year-old with a 3-year-old daughter, and I haven't slept in 3 years. Today I'm going to talk about the testing aspects surrounding Common Core. Specifically, are the tests valid? How would these tests affect vulnerable populations of children? And the proposed accommodations set forth by your testing consortium, are they good? And finally, I want to answer the question, are our kids being used as experimental guinea pigs? I'm going to start from the end and give you my conclusions, and then I'm going to fill in the blanks. Are the tests valid? Absolutely not. How will they affect vulnerable populations, specifically African American kids, Latino kids, depressed kids, anxious kids, children who are suffering from ADHD, gifted children, and so on and so forth? The outlook is not pretty. The proposed accommodations, they are lacking in rigor and depth. And will our children be used as experimental guinea pigs? Absolutely yes. Now, one point I want to keep in mind, and I think we should all keep in mind. As policymakers, when a children comes into your room, I truly think that the first thing that needs to come into our heart and our head is that our children are bigger than us. And what I mean by that, our children are complex people, cognitively, socially, emotionally, and across the spectrum, across different areas. And we just need to keep in mind through all of this and just kind of forget about the politics involved, because I know this is very a hot topic politically. But we all need to keep in mind that our children are bigger than us. The adaptive Common Core testing, honestly, is the next wave in testing. It's a fantastic technology. However, it is extremely complex. This is not the first time it's been used before. The GRE test for graduate students is a graduate test, graduate school admissions test. My wife, who is a genius, literally, scored very well on it. And I am certainly not going to state for public consumption what my score was. However, in terms of children from the K through 12, this has never been done before in the history of the United States of America on this level and on this scope. Someone forwarded to me a recent letter from your state superintendent Evers, which complimented Common Core, but he did forget to leave out this fact, that Common Core testing of this scope has never been done before in the history of the United States of America. And that's okay. I mean, that's fine. I'm a local clinical community scientist. I make a living off of the results of people's experimentations. However, there needs to be rules. And one of the first rules that you have when it comes to experimentation is that there must be informed consent. What informed consent is, letting people know exactly what type of experiment that is going to happen. And two, what are the potential consequences or damages that can result from experimentation. Now, if we did any type of experimentations in graduate schools, we would be immediately kicked out of school without providing informed consent to the subjects. In the private sector, our clinicians would lose their ability to feed their children. They would lose their license if we performed any action in our clinic without providing informed consent. So let's talk a little bit about the Smart and Balanced Assessment Consortium's pilot test that happened from February 20th to May 24th, 2013. According to their website, 5,000 schools participated, and I'm guessing probably about 200,000 kids. And they also mentioned something that they had 900 cognitive labs active during this time. And so I'm going to boost that number from 200,000 to 500,000 when you add in the 900 cognitive labs involved. With that in mind, we have 500,000 kids who are subjected to experimental testing, whose parents were not provided informed consent of this testing. And as part of that informed consent, they should have been warned that there are potential consequences for their children being a part of this experimentation. And the other part is, nobody knows what's on these tests at this point. You have an upcoming pilot test in Wisconsin. That would be from March 18th to June 6, 2014. And I'd just like to read exactly what your consortium said about it. Quote, and this is talking about this test, "This will closely resemble summative assessment taken in 2015. In English, that means we will never test the final version." And let me repeat that. The final pilot test that is being done in this state from March 18th to 2006 will closely resemble the summative assessment that will be taken in 2015. Do we truly understand the ramifications for our children in terms of this one point alone? I had a 3-hour meeting with our state superintendent counterpart, Dr. Tom Martell Minlove in Salt Lake City, Utah. And he called me into his office after I appeared on the Glenn Beck show and explained some of my concerns about the testing. And he wanted to know why I would never let my children be a part of this. And I just told him two things. There's no pilot test data for the 2015 tests that will be rolled out. And there's no data to support the validity claims to vulnerable groups who will be taking this test. In other words, the Smart and Balanced Assessment Corporation, American Institute of Research, and CBT McGraw-Hill, who will be writing this test, have basically stated that they have created the holy grail of assessment tests, that it's completely valid for vulnerable populations. However, the following groups of children are in serious trouble: African Americans, Latinos, children with ADHD, depressed children, anxious children, autistic kids, gifted kids, and probably a few more that I left out, but then again, I'm 50 and I have a 3-year-old. Another topic I want to touch on are the accommodations. And this again is from the Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium's website. Their document, actually this is the group, they are called the the Smarter Balance Test Administration and Student Assessment Group. And this student assessment group created a document called Accessibility and Accommodations Framework. I spent 8 hours trying to figure out who was in this group. I would hope, as a parent of several children with disabilities, that they would have a licensed clinical psychologist in this group, and a wide and varied group in order to help build valid accommodations for this group. Anyway, this mystery group's goal, according to the website, is to provide accommodations that all yield valid scores that count as participation in statewide assessments when used in a valid manner. What does that count as participation mean? And so basically, if these vulnerable groups show up to the test and participate, they would deem that as valid. So a summary of the SBCA accommodations data group. We have a mystery accommodations work group that nobody knows who is in this group. Their goal is to create the world's first error-free validity test for vulnerable population groups. And the biggest thing that just comes to me is that there is absolutely no data whatsoever to show that these tests are valid, or that the accommodations that they are proposing are valid. There's no peer-reviewed research. Absolutely no data. The Smarter Balance Assessment Corporation and their vendors are not bigger than my children. There are a ton of issues I could touch on in terms of testing, but my time is limited. And you can ask me questions about these other issues later on. The privacy issues involved in testing. Are the tests developmentally appropriate for all ages? Will certain children have a reaction to taking these tests? And the other thing I did not touch on are gender and cultural biases. And a big reason why I'm not going to touch on these is because the answers to these questions are even more depressing than what I've talked about on these other issues. I've given you all a handout, and if you could all read it. The clinicians in our, if you can just start at the first page, the clinicians in our group utilize, I think, one of the country's most extensive assessment tests in the nation, and it is called the Kaufman Test of Educational Achievement, the second edition. And what this is are validity data that is missing from Common Core. And as you can see, as you turn in the first page, you see all the different states that they conducted pilot tests at. And if you turn in a couple more pages, you can see that they did validity norms from ages kindergarten to 12th grade. And also, more importantly, they did data in terms of specifically African American and Hispanics. And I didn't bring this. Oh, yeah, here it is on the fourth page. They specifically talk about the validity issues of this particular achievement test for kids who have specific learning disabilities, speech and language impaired, kids who have ADHD, mental retardation, emotional and behavioral disturbances, other impairments, and gifted and talented. This is important because in the private sector, if you come to our clinic and we give you an achievement test, that does not have this data, we lose our license, which means I lose my ability to feed my children. The vendors who have been hired from the Smart and Balanced Assessment Consortium that is running your testing group, none of this. I'm pretty much done. I just want to clear the air. I'm not a member of the Tea Party. I'm not a political activist in any means. For my life, I voted 95% of the time for Democratic candidates. I'm not running for political office. I hate politics. And despite my appearance on the Glenn Beck show, I love Jon Stewart. I am a son of a medical doctor who retired 2 weeks ago after 50 years of medicine. And his career started riding in the back of a bus to his medical residency because he grew up in the Deep South. In other words, attempts to label me politically are pretty much futile, and it doesn't matter. And you know why? Because we're not bigger than our children. This issue can't be about politics. These things don't matter. I'd like to read you something from one of the leading experts in the world on autism, Dr. Temple Grandin. Just a short paragraph here. If you've read some of my other books or seen the HBO movie of my life, then you know the tremendous debt I owe to Mr. Carlock, my high school science teacher. But in one crucial respect, his thinking probably held me back. When Mr. Carlock saw that I couldn't do algebra, just could not do it, he redoubled his efforts to make me learn it. He didn't understand that my brain doesn't work in the abstract, symbolic way that solving for X requires. Mr. Carlock wasn't somebody who liked to give up on a student, and I'm sure he thought that by pushing me hard on algebra, he was helping me. But what he could have done instead is recognize my limitation in that area and play to my strength in another area. In other words, what the great Dr. Grandin was telling us is one size can't fit all. We need to shift our focus on maybe testing and evaluating on how kids learn. Maybe not so much on what kids are learning. My professional recommendations as a doctor of clinical psychology is pretty simple. We have to stop Common Core as it is currently constituted today. Why? Because our kids are bigger than you. My recommendation as a father of 4 beautiful children from the ages of 3 to 24 are simple also, and these are directed to the parents in this community. Do not participate in Common Core testing. Opt out your children. You need to send a message to your superintendents that our kids are bigger than yours. Parents are and must always be the resident experts of their children. Thank you very much, committee.
Thank you. Again, I'm going to ask you to refrain from any sign for or against any of the speakers so we can keep moving. Thank you. Senator Brookmere.
Thank you very much, Doctor. I appreciate your being here today and your testimony. Given your expertise dealing with vulnerable children, and specifically you talked about some of our minority children, children with ADHD, children who are depressed and autistic, is there any test available right now out there that you find that is suitable for this population of children? And or in general, is there any testing for all children that you see out there that would be worth adopting?
There are plenty of tests out there, but rather than listing tests, I'd like to answer your question just conceptually. And the ironic thing is, many of these tests, fantastic tests, are designed by the same people who are working on your Common Core tests. I have nothing against these vendors. They're brilliant. They do great things for the children in this community. But the difference is, when children come into our clinic and take these tests, these vendors have taken the time to do the validity studies. And so when these vulnerable children come in, we can adjust the results on an individual basis based upon these studies and this data. In other words, on an individual basis, we can provide different weight to the test scores depending upon their characteristics or how they present that day. In terms of specific tests, these vendors have developed a lot of neuropsychological tests that eliminate a lot of the cultural biases and a lot of the other biases. But the science is great and it's ongoing. So it's not so much the what of the test, it's who's given it and how much study and effort has been put into studying what these kids do.
Could I have one follow-up? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So are you, then your concern is that this current test being developed by the consortia does not have adequate validity and reliability from your perspective?
Ma'am, it's not a concern. They have none.
Thank you.
Senator Lehman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your testimony. Before I get to my question, I'm just really curious how you got here from South Jordan, Utah. Do you represent a group that's interested in this, or you pay your own airfare, or how did you get here?
Well, I was literally sitting in the backyard with my 3-year-old pulling leaves, and I got a phone call from some guy, and he said, will you come out to Wisconsin to testify in your expertise in regards to psychological testing? Guy handed me a check, so I'll read it. This check is for $1,147.98 that paid for my plane fare and car rental, and it is from the American Opinion Foundation.
I appreciate that. Did you register and are you testifying on behalf of that foundation, or are you just testifying by yourself even though they paid your way?
This is the first time. I just opened this.
Okay,
This is
you
the
don't
first
even
time
know
I've
who
read
that
it.
is.
I don't even know who they are.
Okay. Right.
If you.
I believe you.
Yeah.
That happens. I mean, I can see there are people trying to get folks to these hearings, and it really isn't a big. It isn't a big problem for me. I think we still listen to you regardless of who sent you or paid your way. But my question is, so much of your testimony had to do with testing, and I'm wondering, have you had experience in schools where teachers are trying to use Common Core standards, and when they're going through the process of unpacking, I think the superintendent just testified about, where they're really trying to use the Common Core standards in terms of instruction? Is your criticism the testing part of it, or have you seen things in schools, and are you familiar with what's going on in schools?
We are an educational psychology clinic, and so yes, we're very aware of what is going on in schools and the impact of Common Core. But with due respect, sir, I am here to testify as a expert on the testing aspects of Common Core. I know nothing about the curriculum or the math or the English. I give you my personal opinion, but,
Yeah. I really appreciate your comments. I think that there's a lot of people out there from all political persuasions who are concerned about how do minority kids and folks who aren't just right in the center fare when the standards are brought up and then the tests are given and then the kids don't look so well. Is that really leading to anything? It's my view that what you're talking about is something else from Common Core standards, but I appreciate your coming all this way to testify. Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Knudsen.
Thank you for coming, and I can appreciate that psychologists are experts in testing. When you were talking earlier about the GRE or graduate record exam and how that was a test that was, I think, similar, you were using that as an analogy. Are you referring really to the fact that our Smarter Balance assessment is going to be an adaptive test where the questions change based on the answer of the previous question?
That is exactly the test that the vendors from the Smarter Balance group are designing for the state of Wisconsin.
So, since a lot of your testimony is about this validation process, and I'm curious about this. I asked at our first hearing a couple of the school districts that had piloted this. My question was the test in fully adaptive mode at the time that the children were taking it? There was not a clear answer to that.
Let me give you
one. I believe
one.
the answer was, we think so. But as a I'm a veterinarian, but just scientifically, it seemed to me that you would first have to test the test without it being adaptive in order to sort of get a baseline benchmark, and then you'd work on the adaptivity of it. So I'm just curious what's been going on in the schools. Do you have any expert knowledge of that? Or maybe we'll hear later from DPI what they know about what's been going on there. What do you know about that?
Well, you're exactly right. I mean, that is the process that they are utilizing right now. They are doing their pilot test in non-adaptive mode. But the final outcome of that is worlds apart than what is being pilot tested right now. It's a completely different animal, and they're basically going to unleash this on your children without any type of prior testing or pilot testing on the actual final test.
So, like many in the legislature, I've been a proponent of testing to be used to evaluate and to hold educators accountable and administrators accountable and to follow the progress of students and see what kind of attainment. And so, frankly, I voted for the Smarter Balance test, funding it, thinking it was a good deal. And I'm not certain what conclusion I should draw from what you're saying. I hear you saying that these very same vendors have created tests that have been fully validated and that you think are really pretty solid tests.
Yes, sir.
So it's not that they couldn't do it. Is what you're saying is that they haven't done it and that they're doing sort of a mass nationwide guinea pig working it out, and then it's going to be sprung on us without proper validation? Is that your point? And then maybe a year or two down the road they can do the validation?
That is 100% correct. See, the difference is when your vendors do a test for our clinic, we're not going to buy it unless they've done this. And the reason that is, as I explained, is that we'll lose our license. When they turn around and they offered their services to you after receiving hundreds and hundreds of millions from the U.S. Department of Education, they just don't have those constraints. They were given the money, and they can do whatever they want.
So how does... I'm trying to understand your comments about the vulnerable groups that you listed off and how they might be harmed by the process. And I think that's the last thing we want but I haven't really heard you be specific about how that harm would happen. I mean, can you give an example?
Well, one example, if you have a child along the autistic spectrum or a high-functioning Asperger's child, they have sensory issues to the core of that diagnosis. And when you have an adaptive computer test, we're not sure of the stimuli that's going to come from that, and there's a high risk for that population to have a complete emotional meltdown right in the middle of the testing. In terms of African Americans, we have a 100-year history of not being able to get that perfect combination right. And at least in the past, before Common Core tests, we were aware of the limitations for our culture, and we were able to, basically make common sense adjustments to it. With this, we have no idea what the effect is going to be on African American, Latino children.
Thank you.
Senator Cullen?
Well, thank you, Dr. Thompson, for being here. I don't know how many things we have in common, but I want to tell you that you are 50 and you have a 3-year-old daughter. And when I was 50, I had a 3-year-old daughter.
Oh, wow. Well, you look good.
Bless
Yeah,
you.
well,
You look real good, brother.
And I got some sleep during those 3 years.
We got to chat afterwards.
Very dedicated mother helped in our situation. You talked about, and I didn't get the exact quote down, but that the Common Core standards had never been, what's being tried with the Common Core standards has never been tried in history. I think was essentially what you said. I may have got one word wrong or something, but that was what I heard you say.
The Common Core testing,
It had never been tried in history. Was that
the adaptive testing along this scale to basically every K through 12 child in America. The United States of America Department of Education has never sponsored or done a test on that level, on that scale. One test fits all American kids. It's never been done, to my knowledge.
Well, I sort of want to get your reaction to this, but I mean, that view, which is just that it's never been done before. America wouldn't be what it is today if we hadn't done some things that never been done before. We're the first nation in the world to have public education for everyone.
That is true.
Our founding fathers set up the first true democracy in the world. Never been tried before, never been done before. I mean, we wouldn't be where we are. So I'm trying to understand why the fact that this has just never been done before is a reason not to do it.
That's a great question, Senator. I have no problem with experimentation, as I stated in my testimony. Let's try it. But, as I said, there are rules, and the rules are in place, such as informed consent and doing validity studies in terms of testing, that we have those things in place as a profession to avoid harm of children. So if America wants to try this experimental Common Core adaptive testing, then America needs to follow common standards in terms of experimentation, informed consent, getting proper test studies on the finalized product, weighing the data, and then we can put it out for our children.
Well, when we talk about things being done, nationwide and all that, I mean, it seems what my concern is that what we have here in Wisconsin, and I suspect in every state in the nation, is we have a very dedicated teacher corps who this is their profession, this is their life, and they are overseen by locally elected school boards who get no pay or very little pay and are elected by the parents largely, and other citizens who don't have kids in the school system, to be the local school board. And my concern is that this, I guess, implied criticism on your part sort of ignores that these people are here in Eau Claire and everywhere else, and they care, and that they wouldn't try to compensate for problems that certain kids or challenges that certain kids have that other kids don't have. It seems to ignore that these human beings who care are going to just let this monolith from Washington or the United Nations or wherever it's been accused of coming from during our hearings. They're going to let something bad happen to the children they care about. That's the piece I guess I have trouble with, and maybe you can respond to that.
Well, they're not going to let that happen. Number one.
So either, okay.
And because good parents aren't going to allow their children to be experimented on. And let me tell you, I'm one of these parents too. And I also employ public school teachers in our clinic. I love public school teachers. I love public school education. I have my two oldest children have gone through public school education, and my two youngest children are currently in public school education. My role as a local clinical community scientist, I have an ethical role. When I have an ethical obligation when I see something coming, any type of policy coming down related to children that could potentially cause them harm, to say something about it. And that's why I'm here now, Senator, and you can be on the front lines to investigating this and putting a pause on this and talking to your vendors and making sure that peer-reviewed science is followed. There are steps to experimentation that can minimize potential harm to children and especially my culture, African Americans. We have to do something. I mean, the last 50 years, look at the results of black kids. For 50 years, the education community, we just haven't found that answer. And so, yes, we do need to be bold. We do need to experiment. But we have to keep the rules of safety.
One last thing, Mr. Chairman. You said that this entire effort is complex, was one of the words that you used. And I found so many times in the sort of government political world that we live part of our lives in, at least, I've so often seen the word complex used as a way of making it just look so difficult to our constituents that we're up here grappling with complex issues, and how in the world could we ever come to a conclusion on something so complex. And usually the complex part of it in our world is it's complex to vote for it and get reelected, or it's complex to vote against it and get reelected. And that's what becomes complex, is the politics of it. And I'm trying to figure out sort of specifically from you, maybe one or two examples, why is this, you think this is so complex, which sort of implies that a lot of people won't be able to figure it out. But why do you think this, in a couple ways, this is so complex?
When I mentioned that in my testimony, I was referring very specifically to the actual design of an adaptive test, which is designed by PhD level psychometricians.
Is it who developed the test that concerns you, or the end product?
Both.
Of the test?
Both. But in answer to your question in terms of the complexity portion, the actual design of the test are done by PhD level psychometricians and clinical psychologists. That's way above my pay grade. I would guess probably 0.5% of all America, if they were given the formulas involved for an adaptive test, could not figure it out. It's that complex. What I did was simplify the issue in terms of not focusing on the actual formulaic complexities of a doctoral level experimental adaptive test, all I've talked about is even if these tests were written by the hand of Moses, there are rules involved.
Okay. All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thompson.
Thanks again for coming. I have a few questions for you also. Would it be accurate to say that when you test someone, the reason you do it is you're looking for data?
Yes. Data is gold.
Right. Okay. Now, much has been made in recent months surrounding the Common Core and specifically the testing that goes with it about the levels of data that are potentially being collected from students, which eventually are going to end up in the hands of the testing companies. And then the testing companies, in my understanding, will be potentially turning this data over to the Department of Education. Department of Education has, U.S. Department of Education has made it pretty clear, Arnie Duncan's running around the country advocating Common Core, that they're in support of this. Are you familiar with a document that was produced by the United States Department of Education called Grit, Tenacity, and Perseverance?
Yes, sir, generally.
Now, this was, I don't know if the title of it was raised in our Madison hearing, but there was reference made to a portion of it during that time because reading from the very first part of the executive summary of this, it says it was done, and this, by the way, was just produced in February of 2013. It says it was to best prepare, how we can best prepare children and adolescents to thrive in the 21st century, an era of achievement gaps that must be closed for the benefit of everyone in society, rapidly evolving technology, demanding and collaborative STEM knowledge work, changing workforce needs, and economic volatility. So they're looking at ways to be able to, from what I can tell here, how can we benefit children? And this is produced by the Department of Education's Office of Educational Technology. So to me that kind of sounds like testing. Now, in here I scroll down on my iPad here. I got to get to page 44 because this was mentioned at a previous hearing, and what the person said was kind of scoffed at by some members of the committee as though, well, that's just a bunch of fly-by-night stuff. I can't believe you're even mentioning that. And I just want to give evidence of the fact that this is something that's coming right out of a document that is written up by the United States Department of Education. So if I go to page 44 of this document, it is somewhat potentially advocating the use of facial expression cameras, posture analysis seats, pressure MOSes, wireless skin conductance sensors, and things like that in use of tests. Now, in reading it, it does clearly say that this is not something that is potentially really viable for classroom setting right now, but just the fact that it's in here tells you that they're thinking about it. Is that something that people should be concerned about, that the United States Department of Education is looking into something like this?
Again, I think the concern is not the instrument itself, but what's the purpose and who's doing it and where's the data going for this. All those instruments that you use are not in and of themselves evil or bad. We just have to have guidelines. And what's going on here in the U.S. Department of Education in terms of testing is akin to the Wild Wild West. There are no regulations. They're doing what they want. Our children are not bigger than them. Our children are bigger than them.
No, in terms of the data, I'm of the opinion, I don't know if you can answer this or not, that the Common Core standards, in order to drive them forward, there needs to be the testing, because the adaptive testing kind of feeds the future revisions, you might say, of the of the Common Core standards. So if they notice changes in the data that's coming as a result of the tests, then they make changes to the standards accordingly. And so would it be accurate to say that without the data, a Common Core really can't survive?
That is true. We need the data.
And so if a state was looking to perhaps reevaluate its participation in Common Core, would the potential way of doing that be to say we're just not going to collect the data?
Yes.
Okay. All right, I have no further questions.
Any further questions? Seeing none. Doctor, thank you for your... Oh, I'm sorry. Representative Larson?
Yes, thank you for your testimony. Before the meeting started today, I asked you if you had ever heard of a computer program called InBloom.
A little bit, yes.
Okay, can you explain to us what that computer program does and why it may be necessary or may not be necessary?
No.
I was hoping...
Generally, it gathers data. And again, data in and of itself is not evil, but there needs to be constraints on it. And one thing I think the committee does need to know is that fairly recently, the U.S. Department of Education had adjusted its FERPA laws, which are the Federal Education Privacy Act, and they loosened them. School districts now have the ability to give out this test data to basically anyone that they deem to be appropriate. And again, for the vast majority of school districts, and I'm sure the vast majority of the school districts in this great state, they're not going to be passing out your kids' vulnerable student data. But the issue is this: they can. The law was changed, is they've given them fantastic large latitude to decide who gets this data. And the law simply states that this data can be given to vendors of school districts' choices. And that's new in our Privacy Act, and it's potentially frightening.
Thank you. That's the only question I had.
All righty, Doctor. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.